MOK and the Hong Kong Council of Social Service, Madam Chen Wai-yong, and we also have invited Dr. Wong, but he is otherwise engaged. So let me first invite this administration and the three deputations in.
我哋咧就係等佢哋入咗嚟，我先講下啦。係 OK， 係咪嗰啲學者都有㗎嘛 ？OK。係，歡迎大家。
Welcome.
仲有幾位朋友。
A few more coming in.
我哋請埋啲學者入嚟個係嘛？係。佢哋行緊嚟緊。翻上嚟，係我哋等埋幾個朋友一齊入。
Well, let's wait for others to come in first.
Mr.
Leong, please come forward to the front row. Good morning. And take your time. Mind your steps. Madam Chan, over here, and Mr. Dr. MOK. Please be seated. Now, welcome to this meeting. Thank you for supporting our discussion. And I think these guests are familiar with electoral meetings, and we originally also invited Dr. Wong Hong, but he's otherwise engaged and is unable to come to our meeting. And this morning, Mr. Matthew Cheung also sent a WhatsApp message to me. I suppose he's in the EXCO meeting, so he's unable to come. But I thank the three deputations here. They have been striving for retirement protection in Hong Kong. They've also conducted a number of studies, so we'd like to hear their views today. And on the 25th of March and in April, we also held a public hearing receiving 69 deputations. We also, on the 27th of May, at that meeting, held another meeting to receive other deputations on the 5 proposals. Now, we agree that at today's meeting, we will discuss the relevant issues. And I think members have received an outline for discussing issues relating to retirement protection models. So I'd like to seek your views on the outline so that when we discuss with the administration in the future, we can have an outline for discussion. And I think you're all very familiar with the operation of this meeting. We have different channels for English, for Putonghua, and also you will not be protected by Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance Cap 382. Again, I believe you are very familiar with the rights, and there is also a paper in relation to matters to note for members of the public attending electoral meetings. So I just want to remind everyone and also colleagues. Now, on this outline that I've proposed, our guests will be speaking on it, and then maybe we'll ask the administration to give their response, and then we can also have an interactive discussion among our guests, the administration, and fellow colleagues. This meeting will adjourn at 12:45. So we have here our guests, the administration, and fellow members. If you have any suggestions to add to the outline, please feel free to do so. So I will now invite the deputations to speak. Let's start with, let's start with Mr. Apo LEONG. I don't want to set any speaking time limit. We'll adjourn at 12:45, but don't speak for too long. 20 minutes maybe. If you need more time, we can give you more. Mr. LEONG. I'll be very succinct. I've repeated my proposal several times before, so it's just a repetition. First, on timing, we believe it's very important. We hope that this time the administration would be serious about it. I hope Dr. Nelson Charles or Professor Nelson Charles' report would give the final say, and we will be moving towards developing a retirement protection system. And Mr. MOK can supplement what I say. Last time we submitted an outline to the subcommittee, and we see a response. And on the tax regime, I think this is also an issue for discussion by the community. It doesn't only involve retirement protection. Also, in our proposal, also an MPF can coexist, because according to World Bank's standards, we should set up a system with 5 tiers of retirement protection. But most importantly, is about universal pension. So the administration should not shun the issue. It should try to resolve it. And last time we mentioned that it should be universal, and it should be done immediately. I hope we can come to a consensus and we can save the argument. On implementation details, I think we can discuss them later and have a round of consultation. Mr. MOK. Thank you, Chairman. Let me respond to the outline for discussion. On application criteria, it should be Hong Kong permanent residents. That means the individual should have resided in Hong Kong for 7 years. And age, then the person should be above 65 years old. But we can give some flexibility because some jurisdictions are already extending the retirement age. I think Hong Kong can also implement similar arrangement. Minimum years of employment, we don't think there should be any minimum requirement, because even for housewives, they also contribute to their families and make effort in raising children, etc. There shouldn't be any minimum years of employment, and there should not also be any means test. I think, in fact, for China, even for China, they can do away with it. Their residents are not required to make contributions, so they are not subject to any assets and income test. They can get pension as long as they reach the age of 65. And so that's my comment on application criteria. On the pension fund, what should be the monthly pension payment? We think that it should be pegged to the average wages. That is, it should be around or at least 20% of the average monthly wages. As for whether the retirement protection fund or amount should be based on the basic living expenses of elderly, we don't think it should be so, because this will give rise to many disputes. So obviously, first of all, it should not be below the level of basic living expenses. That is the CSSA amount. It should not be below that, but the most ideal way is to peg it to the average wage or average income. As long as the wages increase, the monthly pension payment can also be adjusted upward accordingly, and it can be revised on an annual basis. We do keep statistics on the average wages, but the CNSD doesn't make public the result. In the by-census or the census, they do calculations based on the data, and they also are regarded as accurate data on average wages. So it is possible to peg it to the average wages and then adjust the pension payment. It can also be adjusted in accordance with the change in inflation rate, and it's simple. You can save administrative costs, and this level doesn't just apply to Hong Kong. In fact, all across Asia, we see that this is the level applied to universal retirement protection.
Perhaps I'll stop here and I'll defer to my other colleagues, and I'll supplement if necessary later on. Good morning, Madam Chair and government officials. I do not intend to answer each and every one of your questions. I think the Alliance for Universal Retirement Pension, we are all in support of universal retirement pension. And we've already answered a question regarding the various options for universal retirement option. There are a few questions which are related to those options, and we don't have an answer yet to those questions. Today, I was thinking what I should say at this meeting. Meanwhile, we are still awaiting the report by Professor Nelson Chow. So, therefore, I would like to bring out a few issues or raise a few questions, so that in future, when the government, put forward, an option, or if Professor Chow proposes an option, what should we do? So I think we should have a discussion along several issues. The first question we need to ask is whether or not we should maintain the status quo, or should we, fight for improvements. I will not go into the details, because when you met with the deputations on previous occasions, there's been a lot of discussions already. I just want to make a summary here. If you take a look at the 5 pillars as suggested by the World Bank, you may refer to my paper. Looking at those 5 pillars and compare that with the situation in Hong Kong, in fact, there are inadequacies in relation to all 5 pillars. For example, the measures to be implemented through public policies, that is the old age allowance, old age living allowance, there are problems with those measures. Would not be it the stigmatization effect, the asset or the means test, and so on. So the needy senior citizens may not be able to have access to the basic living allowance. The other pillars like the MPF and support by family members, we still don't have sufficient safeguard or protection now. If you look at Hong Kong, with reference to those 5 pillars, you'll find that there are inadequacies. So this time we have this, precious opportunity to, we should fight for improving on the current situation rather than maintaining the status quo. Secondly, over the past few months, whenever the government, say anything on this topic, the government is always saying that they already, they are implementing many measures with a very extensive coverage, such as the old age allowance and the old age living allowance. And it's argued that 80% of the senior citizens are already covered by these measures. But even if you have a percentage for the coverage, we have to ask a question as to whether or not all these measures are sustainable. The Council of Social Service paper provide members with some figures. Be it CSSA or old age allowance, the number of people involved are very large. And if you look at the historical record, the number is increasing all the time. So our question is, how sustainable will these measures be? We're worried that one day the system simply will go bankrupt. So we have to consider whether or not we should use public finance to support the retirement regime for senior citizens, or should we opt for a contributory model. In 3.3, we have listed the problems that the senior citizens face and the potential problems that might exist. Based on those 2 points I referred to just now, I think we should, be exploring other options. The Council of Social Services and the community has also proposed a contribution model with contributions from both parties. When Professor Chow, publishes his report, and when the government put forth any proposal, the government will have to, the public will have to consider the question as to whether or not resources will need to be redistributed, and if so, should the resources be distributed to the poor senior citizens, or is it the case that all senior citizens should be equally entitled? So there are. Both options can resolve the current problems and potential problems. For example, if the benefits will only be given to the low-income senior citizens, there might be a labeling effect. And as a result, even those who are needy may not come forward to apply for the benefits. If the retirement benefits are to be given to all citizens, the amount may not be enough to ensure that they will live in have to live in a dignified manner when they retire. Let me reiterate that we hope there could be a universal retirement pension. Back in 1994, the government has actually proposed an old age retirement fund. The amount was $2,300 per month, but it wasn't endorsed at the time. So this. And if there are any options to be put forward now, I think LegCo and the community would need to come to a consensus. And we are already at a very critical stage now. If we do not, implement universal retirement pension, I think we'll be missing a precious opportunity. The World Bank proposes 5 pillars for retirement protection. What I was talking about, involves a few of those pillars. There's also the MPF, and I'm sure you've heard about many of the problems about the MPF. I heard that this afternoon the MPFA will be launching officially a consultation on the subject of the management fees for the MPF, which could probably be reduced. Would there be any annuity, plans? So what the NPFA will be proposing is one of the possible, measures. I'm sure LegCo is also would be considering the other issues yet. Of the 5 pillars, we also have, for example, family support and also, support by way of social services. There are various types of social services which benefit the elderly, and how we can improve further on that, we can certainly have a discussion. In summary, when we talk about retirement protection, we need to consider several principles. For example, there are 6 principles. First of all, basic protection, namely that the system should ensure that all senior citizens will be guaranteed a basic income. Secondly, the question of sustainability. That is, as the population demographic structure changes, as the economy goes through ups and downs, the system should be able to sustain itself. And thirdly, whether it's a contributory model or whether or not the benefits to be paid for out of tax revenue, it should be affordable for all. And fourthly, that is, the amount of protection a person gets after retirement should be a certain percentage of the average age. In Norway and Sweden, it's 60%. So how many percent would be acceptable to the people of Hong Kong? We can certainly explore. Fifthly, flexibility. Whether or not will the scheme be flexible so that different members of the community can choose the appropriate way to retire. And sixthly, the administrative costs of the system. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the officials whether you have any response to the points raised by our deputations. I think Professor Chow's study will assess the various options, and the principles that he will be considering will be the same as those suggested just now. For example, the question of affordability, public finance, whether public finance should be involved, contributions by employer and employees. So Professor Chow will conduct analysis on all those issues. There is also the question of sustainability. That is, the option will apply, what will be the financial impact 30 years from now, and also the sustainability of the 3 pillars the government relies on it at the moment. Professor Chow will be making projections and analysis. One speaker talked about the basic, level and so on. And I'm sure Professor Chow will also look at the adequacy of the 3 pillars which the government relies on. So I'm sure all those issues will be covered in Professor Chow's study. The speaker also raised the question of stability and affordability. Thank you. Ms. Wong Kok Ling, Chairman. Madam Chair. What the government is now doing is to enhance the retirement protection regime. And various speakers have already mentioned this afternoon there will be a press conference regarding the core fund to deal with the question of fees charged to MPF contributors, and also how we can help the employees to make a choice that it would really be compatible with the objective of long-term retirement protection. The MPF scheme has been implemented for more than 10 years. As the amount of savings accumulate, we need to review the system, and later on we'll be putting forward a proposal to LegCo. Right now, the trustees are required by law to allow the scheme members to withdraw the accumulated savings at the age of 65, but people still have many years to live after retirement. So we are consider exploring the possibility that the employees can withdraw the accumulated savings in stages. In response to what Ms. Wong said, the Council of Social Services has put forward various made certain comments about the MPF scheme. You talk about the management fees and the setting off mechanism. This afternoon, you will not be touching on. You only be talking about the question of fees. Right? Have you? Well, the press conference will mainly focus on the subject of the core fund. I said I mentioned the possibility, the option of employees withdrawing their accumulated savings in stages. The government is working on various options at the same time. Mr. Tankap Pugh. We're worried whether you're contemplating the launching of a core fund but because the consultation paper has yet to be released. But the core fund will involve, $50–60 billion. Some people say that we will continue to allow the trustee to operate these funds, or we can, by way of tender, award the contract to the trustees to manage the core fees, and thirdly, to find a statutory body to manage the funds. From what I read from the media and from what I've heard from the officials, the third option is not very likely to take place. Whether you set up another organization or entrust the task to the monetary authority, apparently you're not prepared to consider this option. We're talking about for $50 billion, so I don't think you have the sincerity to create a larger retirement protection regime.
And if you leave it to the market, the wealth gap will just continue. Do you agree with me, Ms. Wong? Details will be announced at the press conference later today, but I can say briefly that in relation to the core fund, there will be conditions on the types of investment, and income and expenditure will also be subject to certain control. You mentioned the three models. How and who should be running or providing the core fund. This is the structure, and we understand that we need a proper structure to achieve cost effectiveness and to lower the fees. But all in all, there are requirements on investment types and income and expenditure, and this is already a great improvement from the existing structure. And so whether a certain organization should act as the trustee, if there is another service provider for the industry, there will be more costs involved, and ultimately we don't want to raise the fees. Now, to cut you short, if the administration is willing to take over the core fund, then it will be a step towards setting up a central provident fund. And to us, we can feel that the government is finally willing to change its mindset on retirement protection. It is now willing to have a greater degree of participation. Is it so? The MPF is the second pillar of retirement protection. The idea is to have it operated by private service providers. This is the role of the MPF. Today we're looking at the other pillar, public assistance, and the government is devoting resources in this regard, and we are refining the other pillar regarding MPF. Your question hasn't been answered? No. Well, colleagues and guests, I'd like to invite you to join our discussion. Mr. Henry MOK, I don't want to go off the track, but I don't think the government is doing anything. on retirement protection or on pension fund, the administration doesn't listen to the public. Now, this report was released several years ago by the Hong Kong Council of Social Service, and the administration simply ignored it. And according to a survey conducted by the Polytechnic University, 40% of respondents in Hong Kong expressed concerns over the lack of protection after retirement, and they urged the MPF be scrapped. And the administration hasn't listened to any of the views. If you look at the Sweden example, as proposed by the Hong Kong CSS or our organization or other organizations, they all propose setting up a investment structure funded by the government. So we should entrust the HKMA to do the investment and to have a guaranteed investment return, so that there will be reliability, and people will know how well they're protected. I don't know the details of this afternoon's press conference and the details of the consultation paper. I just haven't heard the administration addressing these issues. They haven't heeded any of the views proposed. I don't know what the administration is doing. The fees continue to be on the high side, and in fact on offsetting arrangement, LegCo has discussed this issue many times before. Even 5 to 6 years ago, a motion was already moved to scrap the offsetting arrangement. The chief executive, during his election, also raised this point. I don't know why the administration hasn't responded to the issue today. Mr. Mok, I think what you say really, you really speak our mind as well. This afternoon, you're going to have a press conference. Now, we're talking about improving the MPF, but you talk about the core fund and how are you going to address the issues raised by Mr. Tan Ka Pil or Mr. Henry MOK, especially when Professor Chow's report is due to be released? And you give an impression that instead of taking a step forward, you are taking a step backward. You're becoming more conservative. Madam Chair, Professor Nelson Chow is conducting a study on universal retirement protection, and his proposal will be released in due course. The government's position is that it is one of the our MPF is one of the pillars of retirement protection and is complementary to other pillars. And as for the MPF system, we focus on improving its design so as to reinforce MPF as a pillar of retirement protection. Now, members have commented on the structure of the core fund, so on and so forth. I think we should wait for the details to come out before we comment on it. The core fund is a major change. Say, for example, the government will have a greater degree of participation in investment to for the sake of retirement protection with investment return, and this is indeed a big step forward. I think we should wait for the whole proposal to be released before we further discuss it. Mr. Peter Cheung. Now, talking about the Hong Kong CSS calculations, maybe the administration can, in a moment, see if you can reply to my question, and our deputations can also comment on it. I'm talking about the page 3 of the HKCSS proposal. At the moment, Talking about CSSA for the elderly, the amount is close to $10 billion. And for the OALA, OH living allowance, the expected expenditure will reach $12.8 billion. That is about 60% of our total elderly population. Then by 2030 or so, the elderly population is projected to increase by 2.5 times. And with the existing level, we are going to pay out $60 billion for the 2.5 time increase in elderly population. But let's not forget that for the elderly population, they still have a life expectancy of 20 more years. So $60 billion for 20 years or so. The question is, with an expenditure of $60 billion, are we going to increase taxes? Maybe colleagues from the administration can object to my suggestion, or maybe our experts can comment on it. So coming back to para 3.3, are we asking the administration to shoulder all costs, or should we start as soon as today to have tripartite contribution? I think one would question this logic. Does it mean that those earning more would have to pay more, and those not having any income will not be paying anything? And is this fair? I think I need to ask the scholars to comment on it. I think perhaps we are not fair enough. The scholars are always fair enough. So perhaps we should invite them to comment on this. Secondly, if we are to implement the tripartite contribution for retirement protection, should the whole system be run by the government, or should it be run by an independent private organization or a number of organizations like the MPF? Which is the most cost effective? Two questions for our discussion. Ms. Wong, would you like to take Mr. Peter Cheung's question? I think this is, in general, matters relating to retirement protection. Now, address my hypothesis. $60 billion is related. Mr. Chow, I'll see if you can take the question. Now, let me respond to your question. Now, Mr. Peter Cheung talked about the population projections and the spendings involved. The details, please speak into the microphone. Professor Chow's study will also be based on the same set of figures. For the coming 30 years, apart from increasing the dependency ratio, there will also be an increase in the average age of the elderly population. These figures will also be incorporated into Professor Chow's study. As for the future spendings on retirement protection, Professor Chow's assumption is that assuming there is no change, what will be the future or financial implications, and all these will be set out in Professor Chow's report. Anything to supplement, Ms. Wong? No? What about the second question? Maybe Ms. Wong can take the second question. Well, let's say we will implement retirement protection. Who should run the system? The government, or one private organization, or like the MPF system, we have various organizations scattered across the system. Now, Deputy Chairman mentioned a proposal. This will fall outside the 5 pillars as mentioned by the World Bank. There will be something else. MPF is, well, I'm not talking about the MPF. So what you've suggested is actually another pillar. So let's not wear a hat of a government official. Can we talk about the theory? So that means, in short, do you agree that it should be run by the government or by a private or by the private sector? Can you answer that? I think in Professor Chow's study, this will be mentioned. I don't think it's not. I think it's not very meaningful for me to comment on it now, because the nature would be completely different. Oh, all right. If you don't wish to answer my question, Mr. Leong, there are different models apart from the MPF system run by private organizations. Say for countries like Chile and also, as set out in this book, there is a reform. They mend their ways and they go back to some centralized provident fund. If that is the case, coming back to the point, we can go out and celebrate. Does it mean that Professor Chow's study would be accepted by the administration? I have been disappointed before. Whenever we talk about long-term structural changes and proposals involving labor rights and retirement protection, what in the end did the government do? They put forward the MPF and the OA and the long-term service payment to offset the OAA. Every time our requests are not heeded.
Each and every time, whenever we put forward a proposal, the government is always, not responding. They always emphasize will focus on the MPA and the long service payment. I think, as Mr. Zhang said, we've looked at a lot of information. We're not relying just on the MPF or the CSSA OAA. What we suggest is that we should have an option which is really a reform, so that we can. The timing is of the essence. The later we launch a universal retirement pension scheme, the price we have to pay will be higher, and the poverty gap will be even larger. And we will be actually deserting these elderly people or people who are about to become elderly persons. I think it should be for Mr. Chow to answer the question in relation to the administration's policy. I think I've already told the panel that Professor Chow's study will be, he will submit a report of his findings in July. And then it will also be forwarded to the Poverty Commission. After that, we will consider the appropriate way to release, disclose the findings. Early on, we heard from members that they hope that the report will be transparent and that it will be fully disclosed to the public. I will certainly relay this suggestion to the Poverty Commission so that they can decide on what should be the way forward. Mr. Pan Siu Ping, thank you. I think we've discussed the subject for a long time. Of course, it's a good opportunity that we have a few scholars to further explore the issue with us. I must first of all declare that I am on the board of the MPFA, and today there will be an announcement regarding the core fund or the default fund. We always emphasize that the MPFA can really resolve the question of retirement as the population ages. Of course, everybody is looking forward to Professor Chow's findings so that we can come up with a retirement protection scheme that is acceptable by the community and is also feasible. I'd like to refer to the discussion outlined today. All along, when we talk about universal protection, we always there's always talk about the need for contribution. The government is unwilling to shoulder the costs, And early on in our discussion, we suggested the government should set aside some money, be it a seed fund or whatever. So one of the questions asked is whether or not we should ask the large corporations to pay a higher tax. In a retirement protection scheme, even if there's a tripartite contribution, money is involved. And money which government has doesn't fall from the sky. It will have to be, obtained through taxation. Now, in theory, once we change the profits tax, the employers will certainly object. Of course, if corporations make a profit, they should make a bigger commitment to the community, and that is only right. How can we ensure that? I mean, suppose Professor Chow, publishes discloses a report, and if his recommendation involves changing the tax rate, then and also the seed money, how much would that be? Mr. Leong Kok said it should be 50 million. So in your calculation, do you have a figure that you can suggest to us for reference? Mr. MOK. Well, actually, this is a very important issue. My personal opinion in response to Mr. Pan is that the employers in Hong Kong, wherever they invest, whether they go to Shenzhen or Asia, they would have to, show a contribution rate of at least 11%. In the whole of Asia, there are 42 countries where the employer's average contribution rate is 11%. And it's not universal. We're not talking about universal scheme either. It's not like what we're proposing, a universal retirement pension scheme. If you also look at standards with development levels similar to Hong Kong, in 34 of those countries, the employer's contribution is 11.2%. In Hong Kong, we are asking for a 5% MPF, 6% contribution from the employers. We're not really adding to additional burden onto the employer. In Shenzhen, you have to contribute 13%. If you go to the central and western part of China, the employer have to contribute 20%. So I believe the tripartite contribution system will certainly work, and I don't think employers have any reasons to reject that. Regarding the tax system, and whether it should be for the large corporations to pay a larger portion of the tax, I think this should be considered under the subject of universal retirement pension protection. I mean, it involves the tax regime. I'm not a tax expert, but I don't know why the government is not doing any work in this respect. In Singapore, people always say that the tax rate in Singapore is similar to Hong Kong, and therefore in Hong Kong we can't increase the tax rate. That is totally wrong, because in Singapore they have a central profit fund regime where the employees have to make a contribution close to 20%. In Singapore, the employers there, other than having to pay the profits tax, which is already slightly higher than that in Hong Kong, they're also making a 14 to 20% contribution to the Central Provident Fund. Besides that, in Singapore, their employers have to pay a 10% sales tax. So if you compare Hong Kong with Singapore, and you say Hong Kong is similar to Singapore, there's certainly room for the employers to pay a higher profits tax. So I don't know why the government is not doing anything and simply putting the burden onto Professor Chow. I understand that what Professor Chow is working on is on the subject of universal retirement pension system, and so I think the government should really consider what what I suggested. Now, if we're going to increase, should we ask the employers to increase the contribution, or should we, increase the tax rate? Mr. MOK is saying that if we benchmark ourselves against other Asian countries, the contribution level is very low. Right now, we're only making a 5% contribution to the MPF. Raising it to 6% is not a problem. Among all the proposals put forward by different groups in our community, the employers should make, welcome to Mr. MOK's suggestion. We will use existing model to deal with the question of retirement protection rather than increasing taxes. I'd like to thank, a question for Professor MOK. Of course, people are very concerned about the question of contribution. Right now, employer and employee contribute 5%. We always criticize the MPF scheme for not protecting housewives, and of course, and for that, the government has to, spend some money to take up that issue. We all agree the government would need to put in resources to promote the MPF system. And people have different views as to how much money funds the government should commit. So what are your views? Ms. Chen or Mr. Leong Polak? If you look at our proposal, the money that Mr. Cheung Kwok Chi suggested should be put in there, and then we can look at the consensus that we arrive at. To have the new regime, we may need to some seed money. Some other people suggested we should use the land fund, but at the least we should include the old age allowance. And at least I think the retirement benefit should be at least 20% of the average wage. Of course, the employer will have to pay a little bit more according to our option. Well, this is also a subject we would like to consult the public's views on. That is the question of contribution. Of the 868 deputations, they all agree that the employer should make a contribution. As to how many percent they should contribute is subject to further discussion. Regarding seed money, basically everyone agrees that the government should, make a contribution. So in principle, I think that should be done. I think that is the consensus of the majority. It was 86 deputations. Madam Chair, the Alliance for Universal Retirement Protection, at the end of 2013, they've already, proposed all these principles. We've been discussing various options, but the government is not making a single response. Mr. Peter Cheung suggested that the growth in the amount and whether or not the government should shoulder the responsibility. I think if you look at all the international literature on the subject, I think including international organizations and the World Bank or the ILO, all requires the government should shoulder the ultimate responsibility. I don't know why our government is not making a response at all. Having heard the deputation, there were officials attending this consultation session. So we support all the principles in this document. Of course, we can further discuss the details, but the principles are the same. Why is it that the government is turning a blind eye to that and come with a smaller amount? I don't think Professor Chow should decide how much money the government should spend. But the government has all the data that is for OALA, OH allowance, OH living allowance, and CSSA payments. adding the three, if we add the three together, would that amount to 20 billion per annum? And what is the growth per annum going forward? A very simple question. And I agree with Mr. Cheung that it will increase, in multiple terms. From 2011, the number of citizens increased by 5% per annum. So in 20 years, it will double. So your expenses now will double at today's prices, and not including the rate of inflation. In 20 years, the amount will double. Why is it the government is not doing anything? What exactly is Labour and Welfare Bureau doing? Are they doing anything at all? I find it very strange that the government is not responding. These are the things that you can do. In our document, we ask you to validate the data. In 2012, when C.Y. Leung became the chief executive, we already done our calculations about old age, living allowance, and the amount we work out was 28 billion. Why is it the government is not, making a response at all? Why? So what's the point of calling a meeting? All of us have been following on this issue for 10, 20, or even 30 years. Mr. Chow, is it true that you are not willing to respond? Regarding expenditure on social security protection, for example, the old age living allowance, when we applied for funding, we also have made a projection. In the long term, the amount will come up to more than 20 billion. When we talk about Professor Chow's study, actually there is a Retirement Protection and Social Security Protection Task Force under the Poverty Commission. Over the past year, the government is attaching a lot of importance to the question of population aging. And hence there is a steering committee on population policy, which earlier on published a document to raise the public's concern on this subject. This time we have commissioned Professor Chow to conduct a study. It's not purely an academic study. We attach importance to each and every of the steps, and we hope that the study will be done in an objective and scientific manner, so that the next stage of our discussion could be more substantive.
Now we talked about some issues, for example, raising the contribution ratio that applies to employers and employees, and some other proposals. For example, if in the future we can redistribute the employees' contribution, for example, to apportion it to the universal pension scheme. These affects those who make contributions to MPF, and there are issues concerning the profits tax. For enterprises earning $10 million, there should be a higher level of profits tax rate, and it's also part of the proposals being looked into. So in terms of sustainability and viability, we consider for each retiree under the respective proposals the pension amount, and also the consideration, additional consideration. For example, adjusting the tax regime for employers, and as mentioned just now, different proposals have different sums involved. Some will be implemented, some suggest implementation by phases, some suggest implementation in one go. So we look at different proposals and the social implications to various sectors of the community, and then we compare these proposals. We're not passing the buck to the academia. Professor Nelson Chow has conducted studies on retirement protection for many years. This is not just an academic study. His team visited various political parties and groups. They checked the proposals with these organizations and parties, including the assumptions. So these proposals should be subject to comparison. And there are also focus groups involving not just proponents, but also the middle class, young people, retirees, housewives, and there are various focus groups for them. And also retirement schemes in other jurisdictions. He also has prepared an article on the different proposals in 10 other jurisdictions. So we looked into issues, for example, like whether the existing three-pillar model is sufficient. This is the focus of the study, and we also understand members' concerns that the report should be made public in the future, and we will reflect your views to the Commission on Poverty. Madam Chair, I'd like to reiterate that for this review, I hope the administration could note this point. They place a focus on the Commission on Poverty, but in fact this issue covers a scope wider than just poverty. We don't want the outcome to be focusing on those living in poverty only. It's about elderly people. As for how or where the money comes from, well, as said, different parties have spoken out, employers, employees, etc. And there should be a startup fund on the government's part. As for whether there should be additional contribution by enterprises, this has yet to be discussed. I hope that for this review, if there are new ideas in forging consensus, this is what the government should do. They should forge a consensus with enterprises. If a proposal in the end involves changing the tax regime, they should discuss with the enterprises. Mr. Chow, you've heard that? Thank you, Madam Chen, for your view. There is a task force on social security and retirement protection under the COP, and it is the COP that, or the task force that has commissioned this study. A report will be submitted to the COP, and in the future, as far as the retirement protection scheme is concerned, of course, it's not just about alleviating poverty. We have to tackle the aging population, and when there is a consensus in society, including employers, enterprises, employees, we need their support before we can finally implement the proposal. So your views will be reflected to them and see which is the best way forward. Next, Mr. Tan Ka-Piu. Thank you, Chairman. This subcommittee focuses a bit too much on the Professor Nelson Chow's study and proposals filtered by the community. But I think we should also deal with the MPF. We don't see any commitment from the FSTB to give a start to tackling the issue of offsetting arrangement. After rather heated discussion in February and March. The discussion somewhat cooled down, and maybe they are happy that they can escape monitoring again. And now nothing has been done. Have you considered some vocational saving schemes, be it mandatory or voluntary? Have you checked and see if there are similar offsetting arrangements in other jurisdictions? MPF should be used for retirement. Have you conducted any research in other jurisdictions where they have severance payment and long-term service payment, and whether offsetting applies? Have you done some basic research? Thank you, Madam Chair. In general, different jurisdictions have different models or mix in the models. Some have severance payments, some have pension payments, some have something similar to the MPF. The retirement protection portfolio is unique to the jurisdiction as a result. We can't say whether there is offsetting arrangement for a particular jurisdiction or not. Let me just reiterate that the administration is concerned about this issue. On different occasions, the chief executive has promised to follow up on this issue. But this is quite a sensitive issue. It involves the direct interest of employers and employees. So we have to be careful in handling this issue. And we are heeding views, and at an appropriate moment, we are going to follow up on it. So first of all, it seems you do have some understanding. Can you put this in writing and let us know what information you have collected, and let us know what jurisdictions have long service payments, severance payment, and offsetting arrangements, and what other jurisdictions say have social security system. So please tell the community that you are doing your homework, and don't wait for the appropriate moment. You've made such a mess in implementing paternity leave. Ms. Wong, can you give us a paper? Yes, we'll see what information we can provide. The information required is clear, right? I understand the member's request. Well, I think it's difficult for the two government representatives to take our questions today. First of all, because the government has not made its positions very clear. They may be senior officials, but they are, after all, not decision makers who can really answer our questions. I'm not going to ask them questions, but I think the purpose of today's meeting is mainly to see the principles in establishing a retirement protection system as set by Mme. Chan and Mr. MOK. We cannot leave anyone out of the retirement protection system in the future. It should cover everyone. As for the level of pension payment, where the line should be drawn, Mr. MOK said that it should be set at 20% of the average wages, and some would ask, there will be implications on the government's financial commitment. Anyway, a line should be drawn. Maybe today, $3,000. Well, someone could just barely get by or with $3,000. So this is one suggestion. But at least we know that a line has to be drawn. The third issue is, where does the money come from? It seems from our discussion just now, there should be tripartite contribution. The government has responsibilities, but as employers and employees, we should also shoulder some responsibilities. And as discussed just now, for employers' responsibilities, whether this can be addressed under the MPF system or whether there should be new initiatives. And the discussion then should pause here, and we should wait for Professor Chow's report. I think Professor Nelson Chow would find it a really thorny task to incorporate everyone's views. But ultimately, all three parties should be involved. We don't know what the ratio should be because we don't know the financial implications, but it should be the principle. So our future discussion should focus on, for example, whether those not in employment, say housewives, should be required to make a contribution, and whether the husband of housewives should be contributing on the wife's behalf, and if so, how much. I personally think that this is somewhat a consensus we forged today. And I hope Mr. Chow could take the matter very seriously when you go back and report to the government, because we're not antagonizing the government. We just want to remind the government that this is imminent. The population is aging. We cannot take any step back. We cannot wait for Professor Chow's report to come out, have a discussion, and then put it on the back burners. That happened before. We had a discussion on CPF, and then in the end we had the MPF.
And there is also the offsetting mechanism, which we do not really want to see. So no matter what the final conclusion will be, I think from my summary of the views of the deputations and also the views that we've expressed in previous discussions, that should be the starting point. If you say that you're not going to consider all those proposals, there will be a very strong reaction in our community. I think Mr. Chow made a very important point. Apparently, he agreed with Ms. Chan that retirement protection should not be considered as the main way to tackle poverty. So I'd like to ask the Labour and Welfare Bureau whether or not it also should have the responsibility to play a role in terms of universal retirement protection. That is, they can also, speak up, or they should, come up with a policy saying that this should no longer be a question about poverty alleviation, but rather an important segment of the development of our whole society. So when Professor Chow submits his report to the Public Commission, the discussion should not be confined within the Public Commission, but rather it should be, disclosed to all the people of Hong Kong, and you should also clearly state that it's not a poverty alleviation measure. Is it going to be universal? I mean, there might be a legal implication here. Article 39 of the Basic Law says that the International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Economic and rights. I think every citizen should be eligible to social security protection, and many countries are working towards that. Goal. In Taiwan, there are retirement protection for different sectors. In 2008, all retirees are eligible to receive an annuity, and the total contribution is 12%, which is higher than the 11% we suggest. So could the Labor Welfare Bureau clarify, or can you clarify today that you have plans to put forward your position to the Poverty Commission, and that is to make retirement protection as an element of social development rather than part of the poverty alleviating measures. The current retirement protection regime is not just about poverty alleviation. We have one part which is social security, and the old age allowance doesn't require the means test for those over the age of 60, 65. The other two pillars that we talk about, that is the MPF, the Provident Fund and private savings, are not poverty alleviation measures. The report will be submitted to the Poverty Commission. On the Commission, you have representatives from the social welfare sector, including some electrical members and employer representatives. But we have an open mind. That is, after the Poverty Commission receives the report, whether or not it should be only for the Poverty Commission to follow up on the recommendations of the report, or should we deal with that report in a different manner? I heard suggestions just now that that the other stakeholders should also be involved. We'll certainly relate all these. We'll certainly reflect all these suggestions back to the administration. Well, this is a broad issue. It's very complex. It's very controversial. So what should be the best way to help us, build up a social consensus is something that we will be looking at. I think this is very important. I think very often you are constrained if you treat it as a poverty alleviation measures. The Article 36 of the Basic Law said that the residents of Hong Kong are eligible to social welfare and their rights are protected by law. This was a strong voice of the labour sector when the Basic Law was being drafted at the time. I think everyone is protected, and it's also stipulated in the Basic Law. Please go back to read Article 39 of the Basic Law very clearly, because this was a clear position of the labour sector at the time when the Basic Law was being drafted. Don't treat it as a poverty alleviation measure. It is actually it's actually about retirement protection. Now, let me see first of all whether there are any further views. If not, I'd like to go back to our discussion outline. According to Mr. Peter Cheung, the source of contribution, all the 68 deputations and the friends who are present today, from our discussion, I can see that the government, I think what we agree is that the government should play a role and it involves the old age allowance and old age living allowance. Regarding CSSA, different deputations have different views. People think that CSSA system plays a different function. So we're talking about old age allowance, and you can also, rely on the tripartite contribution, employer, employee, and government. Because right now the government doesn't make a contribution for the MPF. So at this stage, I think we would like the government to also play a role. Regarding contribution, I think we have more or less, I wouldn't say a consensus, but I think our views are very similar. There's been a lot of consensus within the community on this point. So I think we have a very clear discussion this morning about the startup fund. All 68 deputations and the views we've heard this morning suggest that the government should, provide a startup fund. Whether we should use the land fund or should the government inject 50 billion or 100 billion, the government would have to, consider taking a few more steps if this is going to be sustainable. Other than the tripartite contribution, the government have to think of something. I remember a few years ago, the government has actually wired some of its surplus into the MPF accounts. That is, remember, a few years ago, the government had done this. Part of the surplus for that year was deposited into each and every, into the MPF account of all the contributors in Hong Kong. So, regarding eligibility, I've asked several questions. I don't think we have too much discussion on this part. So do members have any further comments regarding eligibility? Mr. Apo LEONG. At the beginning, I raised that we should draw a line, that is at the age of 65, which is I don't think there should be a means test for universal retirement pension. The International Covenant on Human Rights says that everyone should have the same right. I think we should be talking about Hong Kong residents, those with 3 asterisks on the ID card. So they'll be eligible to, like those who are eligible to apply for CSSA and old age allowance. It shouldn't include those who have emigrated to Canada or Australia or New Zealand. These people are still entitled. I don't think that should be allowed anymore. So we should not exclude those who have emigrated. But they still hold Hong Kong ID cards. I mean, still with 3 asterisks on the ID card, but these people have already emigrated to Canada, the States, Australia, and New Zealand. Last time they were eligible to receive the $6,000. Yeah, they were not in support of that. What about those who are living in the mainland? Those who have emigrated abroad is a separate category. Okay. Mr. Teng Ka-Piu, regarding the civil proceeding about people who have not yet lived for 7 years in Hong Kong will be entitled to CSSA benefits. The Bureau has said that this may not apply to other welfare benefits like old age allowance and so on. I think there's a difference. The CSSA is a safety net. When they don't have even enough to survive, then you need to help them, whether or not they have stayed for 7 years or not. Regarding the means test, the years of residence, and the number of years that they have made contribution to any system, I think in other countries they would also count that. And I'm sure different organizations promoting universal retirement protection may have different views. Dr. Pan. I'd just like to follow up on the same point. I agree with Dr. MOK. That is, for those who have emigrated, previously we've actually, make injections into the MPF. For those who have emigrated, I have doubts as to whether or not they should be entitled to the same benefits. But regarding the proceedings in the High Court, we knew the case involved someone who has not yet stayed for 7 years in Hong Kong, but she would need to be looked after by way of CSSA, payment. But people were asking whether or not it will drastically increase the government's financial commitment. But if someone is a Hong Kong resident, they should be entitled to the same rights, and there might be a different treatment for others. I think that would be more acceptable to our community.
張國柱。
多謝主席。我諗鄧家彪
I think that could be discussed. I think we can have a detailed discussion regarding the point raised by Mr. Tan Ka Pio. The question is, some people are eligible and others are not eligible to the benefits. So whether or not it's universal is important. For some, it was suggested that someone who is 65, has retired, has emigrated, he's entitled to benefit, retirement benefit there. He comes to Hong Kong. When he reaches 65, will he be entitled to retirement protection benefits in Hong Kong? That deserves to be discussed, because this person will be getting double benefits. He is already collecting. I think he's reached the age of 60, and even if he stays in Hong Kong, he will be receiving retirement benefits from the country where he lives. Same, even for those in China, from China. And previously, in some jurisdictions, if you stay there for a minimum number of years and you've paid sufficient amount of tax, you'll be entitled. But now they have further tightened the criteria that if you've not worked in such countries or paid taxes in such countries, you will not be eligible. But I don't think this is a question of survival. Even if these people live for a year in Hong Kong, if they suffer from any hardships, our social security system can take care of them.
That means that we use the other social security system instead of retirement protection. So we're not totally against the issue. The question is on eligibility. We can then have a very detailed analysis. If there is a consensus in the community that whenever the years of residence requirement can be met, and if the person reaches a certain age, say 65, then the person should be eligible. If this is the consensus, so be it, probably because we are an affluent society. If, however, we think we should be prudent and that retirement protection should be given to those who have paid taxes before, that's another matter, but it will not in any way affect, it's not a matter of survival. I think there is no unanimous voice on these issues. Of course, there will be different views. We also advise the administration not to treat this matter very seriously, to discuss with the community. For everyone living in Hong Kong, should everyone be eligible as soon as they reach 65 years old, and that there should not be any distinction on years of residence requirement. We have no particular stance. I have this impression that not many of the 68 deputations received had much to say on this issue. So it's up to the government. So we talked about the application criteria and contribution mode. And what about retirement protection? What should be the sum? Mr. Leong and Mr. MOK suggest 20% as the, and meeting the minimum requirement, meeting the basic living expenses. I think this is on the low side, judging from the 68 deputations' comments. Of course, it should be pegged to inflation and adjusted annually, instead of the biennial review system adopted by the minimum wage. Other issues I read on, other social security and contribution plans. For example, after setting up the retirement protection scheme, should also an MPF be retained? I feel from the deputation's comments just now that this is the all-encompassing option. That is, you can incorporate all existing systems into this big one. Is that the case, Mr. Leong? I think universal retirement protection should apply to all, whether the company offers also or MPF. Should be an additional benefit. Some people not in employment will not benefit from these systems. Anything to supplement, Madam Chan? Our proposal for universal retirement protection is to incorporate different existing proposals or systems. Now, there is a question on what the level of payment should be. If the level of pension is set on the low side, then some may require additional help. Say there are those who do not have their own savings, and then on top of the CSSA, for example, they may need extra help. Mr. MOK, this is my personal comment. I don't represent the organization. Now, we responded to 4 points of the outline. That is, first of all, whether the senior citizens on retirement pension should also apply for CSSA. I support it. I think so, because the senior citizen may have special circumstances. It may be a disabled member, family member, and he may have special needs, and he should be eligible to apply for CSSA. So CSSA should be retained. Our suggestion is that the pension money should exceed the poverty line. It should be above the poverty line. It can greatly reduce those living in poverty. And yet we should also allow some senior citizens to apply for CSSA should need be. Say if the pension sum is $3,000 or $4,000, the average monthly income is over 20. So if there is a need, according to our calculation, it's close to $4,000. And if need be, they should also be eligible for CSSA. And about 90% of CSSA elderly recipients, according to our calculation, will no longer be required to apply for CSSA if they're covered by the universal pension. And in short, I support the first point, that they should also be able to get CSSA. Madam Chan. Now, there are several elements, several levels of CSSA. They have a special subsidy on top of the basic rate, and also rental allowance and medical subsidy. So About the universal pension, we're talking about a standard rate. After getting the pension money, there should continue to be other forms of support under CSSA for the elderly, such as healthcare. I want to supplement of the 68 deputations. I think the majority would like to keep the CSSA. I hope Mr. Chow would also note this point. You cannot just scrap the OAA and OALA for the universal retirement protection. This is also necessary. The second point, after setting up the universal retirement protection scheme, should the existing OALA or OAA be kept? I recall that quite many of the 68 deputations think that these two can be done away with. And I agree, because I agree to keeping the ORSO and MPF. Basically also adopts a rate higher than that of the MPF, but we don't know what will happen in the future. We need to be careful. Mr. Chow, do you understand? Because we often say that also is higher. It adopts a high rate. It was in the 80s and 90s that many corporations adopted also, and the economy was good, and many employers contribute over 10%. That means we can scrap the pension. I think that's the case for Japan and Taiwan. It has provident fund and also occupational pension fund. Vocational pension fund. So you can look at Japan and Taiwan, and I think it's in our research report. You can take a look. Mr. Henry MOK talked about other Asian countries. Even for the mainland, their system has a double-digit figure for the retirement protection. So we should follow other jurisdictions' systems. Finally, the offsetting arrangement of MPF and its impact on the accrued benefits of MPF. That is the MPF payment being used to offset the long-term service payment and severance payment. Now, you talked about the core fund. You'll be talking about the core fund this afternoon, but not this issue. I'm very dissatisfied. Ms. Wong, something off topic. I want to emphasize that we should scrap the offsetting arrangement. Otherwise, 10 years down the road, the problem with the low-income group will be even more serious. Many of them work on a 2-year contract, so they have no money for retirement. So basically, I've invited guests and colleagues to take part in our discussion. We've covered all the points. Anything to supplement? Mr. Henry MOK? As said by Mr. Apo LEONG, I agree that universal retirement protection should be implemented within the next 2 years. It is very important that we do so. In 1994, if we had implemented the old age pension fund, according to projection, it would have just been 1 or 2%. Now we've dragged our feet for 2 decades. The contribution rate has risen to such a high level because we could not benefit from the accrued benefits or the cumulative benefits. So we must not delay anymore. We must make a decision this year and implement that next year, or by 2016 the latest. Otherwise, there is no chance for us to set up a healthy and sustainable universal retirement protection system. I hope the administration can be decisive and really think for the interests of Hong Kong and to serve Hong Kong people. Thank you for raising your point, Mr. Henry MOK. For those here, we have been warning the government time and again. In 1994, Mr. Lam Wun Kwong was still a government official under Home Affairs, and at that time the money we talked about was just $5 billion, very substantially smaller sum, and the contribution rate was much lower. We're talking about $100 or $200 billion now. So if you continue to, if you miss the opportunity again for our next generation, for the working class in the future, you're really not doing justice to them. In the face of aging population and the problem of poverty, the issues cannot be resolved in the future. So we have all been working on the same issues for several decades. We have been advocating a retirement protection scheme for decades, except Mr. Tan Ka Piu, and he will be suffering in the future. When we get old, it will be difficult for him as the next generation. So I hope the administration will not just play the stalling tactics. Of course, I hope Professor Chow would incorporate our views, and the administration would be floating a proposal which is universal, which will not shun issues, which will and I think of the 68 deputations, I can see that many deputations were in fact young people. So that's a very important comment. You have to implement it in the next 2 years and do it as soon as possible, or the government will be in a greater plight in the future. Ma'am Chan?
I understand that there will be an announcement regarding the consultation on the core fund. How long would that consultation period be? I think at a certain stage in the consultation period, we could be discussing the reports by Professor Chow. I hope that the administration will plan this more thoroughly so that the public can have a clear understanding. Otherwise, you may have one, two consultation, and then we'll be confused, and we don't even know what we're talking about, which aspect of retirement protection that we're talking about. So I really hope that when we discuss the current review, we should really be able to give the people of Hong Kong, the chance to live in a dignified manner. Point of information, the consultation will be for 3 months. I don't know whether this is a tactic on the part of the administration. Ms. Chen asked a very good question. The core fund will certainly be discussed by our panel. It will not be discussed by the subcommittee. It will be discussed by the Economic Services panel. But this is related, since it is related to retirement protection, I think the welfare panel should also discuss that. It's not just about economics. A lot of the things which involve the MPF falls within the ambit of the welfare panel. Of course, this committee cannot represent the panel. Certainly, we will go back and talk to our colleagues, and I think we can call a joint meeting of the two panels. Okay, I agree with Ms. Chen. Professor Chow will come to meet with us at the end of July. You're making an announcement regarding the core fund today. So I don't know why you're only allowed for 3 months. I mean, the timetable don't seem to I mean, everything is overlapped. So Ms. Chen raised a very good point. We're worried that this could be a tactic by the government. Our role is to monitor the government, and we need to be careful. But anyway, I'd like to thank our friends for coming here to have this fruitful exchange with us. I also like to thank the two officials, although you don't have all the answers for us today. And we're closely monitoring what the government will be, coming up with. What sort of proposal? So we have a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. Well, this committee will meet again on the 22nd of July at 10:45. We'll be discussing mainly the report on the study conducted by Professor Chow and his team. It's the 22nd of July. Deputy Chairman. Madam Chair, I'd like to also add that the Poverty Commission will next meet in the middle of August. I suspect that the government would like to, take longer before they will release that report. So at that meeting, we will not be able to discuss the entire report. The most important thing is whether or not Professor Chow is willing to come. So why don't we change the item a little bit? We invite Professor Chow to have a discussion with us on the prospect of retirement protection in Hong Kong. So he won't need to mention anything in his report, but he certainly would have his views regarding the retirement protection system going forward. So I would like to simply amend the topic for our discussion, and we invite Professor Kam to come. Even if the report is not yet ready for publication, we will still invite him to come. So, Mr. Chow, please go back and tell the administration not to do anything to stop Professor Chow from coming to meet with us. We have the best of intentions. We've been fighting for this for decades. We've put forward our proposals to the government. We hope the government will respect that. And finally, I don't want to meet at 10:45 for our next meeting. We've actually asked the Secretary to come. We all know that on Tuesday the Executive Council will meet, and so I propose that we meet in the afternoon. Mr. Chow, you'll also be welcome to our next meeting. We'll invite Professor Nelson Chow to come as well, and the Secretary to listen to our views. We'll also like to extend our invitation to Mr. Chow as well. We accommodated Matthew Cheung already the last time. I think our session will end on the 18th. Let's see whether it clashes with any other meetings. Okay, shall we change the time of our meeting, our Tuesday meetings, for the afternoon? Okay? Thank you very much.